If every country on earth is drowning in debt, who's collecting the payments? Because for every debtor there must be a creditor. For every nation in red, there must be someone or something standing in the shadows, holding the ledger. What if I told you that the true power in our world doesn't sit in parliaments or palaces, but behind closed boardrooms, inside a network of institutions that own everyone's future? This is the story of the hidden empire that controls the flow of global debt. Not through armies, not through flags, but through money itself, the most powerful weapon ever invented. To understand how a small group came to own the world's debt, we need to rewind back to the early 1700s, when kings discovered something dangerous. You can borrow wealth faster than you can conquer it. In 1694, the Bank of England was born not as a government office, but as a private institution. Its mission: fund wars the king couldn't afford. Investors would lend gold, and in return they'd receive bonds contracts promising repayment with interest. This was the moment debt became a business. From that point on, governments no longer printed money, they borrowed it. Every pound, franc, or dollar began its life as someone else's liability. And once that system worked in England, it spread like wildfire. Central banks rose across Europe. The Rothschild banking dynasty financed wars between the same nations, sometimes both sides at once. Debt became the new empire, an empire that needed no borders, no flags, and no armies, just interest rates. Fast forward to 1913, the United States had just created something that would change history forever. The Federal Reserve, a central bank designed to stabilize the economy, but few realized what it truly was: a consortium of private banks, authorized to issue currency as debt. For every dollar created, another dollar of debt appeared somewhere else. Money was no longer wealthy, it was a claim on future work, future taxes, future generations. World War I came, nations borrowed. World War II came, nations borrowed more. Each crisis expanded the empire's reach, and by 1944, as the dust settled, representatives from 44 countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There, a new financial order was born. The US dollar became the world's reserve currency, the foundation of global trade. Every other currency would be pegged to it, and the dollar itself was backed by gold. It looked stable, honest, controlled, but beneath the surface, a silent shift was already underway. By the late 1960s, the US was printing more money than it had gold to cover. Wars in Vietnam, massive spending, and political promises outpaced production. Foreign nations began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. And in 1971, under pressure, President Richard Nixon made a single announcement that ended centuries of monetary history. It is the policy of the United States to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. That temporary suspension never ended. Money was no longer tied to anything real. From that day on, every dollar, every euro, every yen became a promise backed by nothing but faith and debt. The modern debt empire was now complete. Central banks could create currency from thin air and charge interest on the very money that didn't exist before they issued it. It was quite literally money made from nothing. As money multiplied, so did control. Private central banks and international institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, the BIS, became the silent architects of nations' destinies. They lent billions to developing countries, promising progress, but those loans came with strings attached: austerity measures, privatization, and dependency. Today, over 180 countries owe money to international lenders, according to the IMF's own data. The world's total debt now exceeds $315 trillion, more than 3 times the entire global GDP. That means for every dollar of goods and services we produce, there are $3 of debt chained to it. So who owns it all? Not kings, not presidents, but a hidden financial web of central banks, institutional investors, hedge funds, and supranational organizations. Entities that never run for office, never face elections, yet dictate the interest rates that decide whether your mortgage rises or your country collapses. The real empire doesn't need soldiers. It has spreadsheets. When the system starts to crack, leaders promise reform. They talk about stimulus packages, quantitative easing, and debt relief. But what do these solutions really mean? They mean printing more money, creating more debt. Each rescue inflates the system further. When central banks lower rates, borrowing spikes. When they raise rates, defaults rise. Either way, the debt machine grows stronger. We are trapped in a loop where debt is both the problem and the product, a snake eating its own tail. Today, the empire is evolving again. Physical money is fading. replaced by digital ledgers controlled by the same institutions that built this web centuries ago. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, promise speed and security, but they also give unprecedented surveillance power over every transaction. If the past was about controlling debt, the future is about controlling behavior. Because once money becomes programmable, so does the population that uses it. In the same way debt once enslaved nations, data and digital currency will enslave individuals quietly, efficiently. Look closely and you'll see the same story repeating for 300 years. 1. Create a crisis. 2. Offer a loan. 3. Gain control. From the monarchs of Europe to the credit cards in your wallet, the formula hasn't changed, only the scale. Every empire falls, but this one, it doesn't need territory. It survives by reinventing itself through inflation, through debt restructuring, through new technology. It feeds on belief. As long as people trust the money, the empire lives. So what can we learn from all this? First, money is no longer a measure of value, it's a measure of control. Every time currency is created through debt, someone gains leverage over your future. Second, the system was not designed to collapse, it was designed to reset. Each financial crisis transfers wealth upward, concentrating power in fewer hands. Third, knowledge is resistance. Understanding the illusion breaks its spell, because only when people see that money is made from nothing can they stop trading their lives for it. The hidden empire that owns every nation's debt doesn't need to remain hidden. It thrives on your attention, your taxes, your silence. Every purchase, every policy, every bailout feeds it. But awareness is the first crack in its foundation. Because once people question who truly owns their debt, they start to realize who truly owns them. So the next time you hear about inflation, stimulus, or debt ceilings, remember, the empire isn't collapsing. It's expanding, quietly, systematically, globally. If you want to understand what happens after the empire resets, hit subscribe, because the next chapter isn't about money at all. It's about who controls the meaning of it.